Violence has always been entertainment.
It's a bloody mess of a match. Babalu continuing, but Heath is into...
Each other's radar.
Just you believe it! Derek Lewis with the knockout. He's got a dozen time for Buford. Tee it off.
And humanity has paid to watch others bleed for as long as we've walked on earth. Imagine risking everything you have, your body, your health, even your life, just to step into a cage.
Whenever I read stories about the business of UFC, I literally laugh and say, nobody knows anything about the business.
You fight for glory, for a dream of becoming a champion.
And the UFC undisputed lightweight champion of the world, Khabib!
Thousands would watch you back then, but now millions watch you on TV. Chanting your name, believing you're one punch away from fortune. But then reality hits. Your paycheck is $12,000, less than a plumber, less than a cashier. And by the time the doctors, the trainers, and taxes take their cut, there's almost nothing left. Meanwhile, while you choose to be the warrior, a modern gladiator, somewhere behind the cage there's Dana White. A businessman who turned violence into a billion-dollar empire, and he doesn't bleed, he doesn't even fight. But every drop of blood makes him richer and richer by the day. And here's a part no one tells you. If you think the system's broken, it's not. It's designed this way. The UFC isn't just a sport, it's a monopoly. A system built to keep the fighters broke and to keep the empire thriving.
He clearly is way more powerful than Paul Herrera. Herrera's a very good grappler here.
Oh my, elbows in number by Goodridge, and that is it.
Speech. Gonna control what people say. Gonna tell people what to believe. Gonna tell people. I don't fucking tell any other human being what to say, what to think, and there's no leashes.
And in order for us to understand this story, let's travel back in time just a little bit back to 1993. The UFC wasn't a billion-dollar empire back then. It wasn't even legal in most of America. It had no gloves, no rounds, no weight classes. It was just raw chaos.
It was 4 fights in one night, 16-man tournament. With no gloves, no time limit, no weight division.
It was karate versus boxing, jiu-jitsu versus wrestling. Taekwondo versus sumo.
As far as
it was marketed as the world's ultimate street fight. It was a radical experiment to see which martial art was truly superior.
Fight me now! Come on! Fuck Muay Thai!
And people loved it. At first, smaller fighters like Royce Gracie choked out giants twice their size. Legends were born, but the violence was too raw. It was too brutal. Politicians declared war on it. They called it human cockfighting.
They have changed dramatically, but what it was at the beginning was human cockfighting. It was. I mean, I've seen people repeatedly getting smashed in the face with a guy sitting on top of them. That's not a sport. That's a throwback to the Roman Colosseum.
Pay-per-view networks started pulling out. Within years, UFC was banned in almost every state in the country. What began as a wild spectacle was now on life support, and it was dying. And then came a gamble that changed everything. In 2001, two casino tycoons, Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta, along with their childhood friend Dana White, bought the UFC. Price tag, $2 million. For a company that was losing money, bleeding out, and circling the drain. $2 million to own the rights and everything that came with it. And in the beginning, people thought it was a bad investment, but the Fertittas and Dana saw something that others didn't. They saw opportunity. And they thought with the right polish, the right marketing, and the right salesmen, they believed they could transform the UFC from outlaw violence into a legitimate global sport. But who exactly was Dana White? At that time, he wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't even a millionaire. He was a hustler, a former boxercise instructor who was managing some fighters on the side. Dana White was no athlete. He wasn't even a champion, but he had one talent: selling violence. He could spin chaos into gold, and with the Fertitta's casino money behind him, the UFC had its salesman.
You don't just say, hey, I'm going to take a while off, maybe I'll be back, maybe I won't. You owe it to the fans, you owe it to that belt, you owe it to this company, and you owe it to Johnny Hendricks to give him that opportunity to fight again.
With the Fertitta's casino money and Dana White's gift for hype, the UFC was reborn. They cleaned up the image, added rules, brought in athletic commissions, and branded it not as a bar fight, but as a sport. The octagon became a stage, and the fighters became the stars. And when you combine the stars with performance and display, you make money, a lot of money. Slowly, the UFC was clawing its way back up onto TV deals, on ESPN, and even pay-per-view. But here's the genius, or the trap. While the audience thought they were watching a sport, Dana and the Fertittas were building something much bigger, a monopoly.
And make no mistake about it, I don't care that Lorenzo bought the UFC, the Pride. The UFC is coming here to kick your ass. Whatever the matchups might be, we finally now get to set the best matches ever. We, as an organization, Pride as an organization, and you, the fans, all benefit, and the fighters, to find out who really is the best fighter in the world.
Every rival league that threatened them, Dana and the Fertittas bought them out and buried them. Pride Fighting Championships, gone. World Extreme Cage Fighting, gone. Strikeforce, gone. By mid-2000s, there was only one octagon in the game, and it was Dana White's UFC. One company controlled nearly every top fighter in the world. If you wanted to fight at the highest level in the world, there was nowhere to go. You had to go through Dana White and the UFC. And that monopoly gave the UFC something even more valuable than the stars and the belts. It gave them leverage. Because when there's no competition, the fighters can't negotiate. They can't play one company against another. The UFC, because of this, could dictate the contracts, the pay, the terms, and they did. It didn't matter if you were a newcomer or a champion. If you fought in the UFC, you had to sign their deal, and those deals were designed to do one thing: keep costs down for the UFC and keep the fighters locked in for as long as possible. The UFC sold a dream of becoming a global superstar, but behind the lights and the cameras, most of the fighters made less than school teachers. Some had to work second jobs, others went broke, and some, after giving their bodies to the cage, were left with nothing.
There's another dimension to the lucrative UFC money-making machine. Many fighters who've given their lives to the company are doing it tough.
They're treating it like a business while trying to get me to consider it as a passion, something that I should just be doing for the love of it. We fighters, we've been shortchanged. We've been underpaid. We deserve better.
I'm pissed, and this isn't fair, and this isn't right. Oh, you didn't get paid enough. You know why you didn't get paid enough? Because you didn't fucking deserve it. That's why.
The guys who actually bring all the value are the ones who make all the money. This is my company. Who the fuck are you to tell me how to pay my people?
The growth in revenue hasn't stopped. You'd think there'd be a plateau, that they'd maximize what they can make, but no, every year they find a new way to monetize something new. They get bigger and bigger broadcast deals, and currently, the last year, they hit $1.4 billion in revenue.
By the late 2000s, the UFC had conquered its competition, but Dana White and the Fertittas weren't done. They wanted more eyeballs, more market, more money. And then came the television deals. The UFC exploded onto Fox, onto ESPN, onto international networks from Brazil to the Middle East. Millions of new fans, billions of new dollars. What was once underground was now mainstream. The UFC was no longer just fights. It was now a brand, a machine, a money-printing empire. In 2016, the Fertittas cashed out. They had sold the UFC to a talent agency called Endeavor for $4 billion. $4 billion.
Be back once again on Forbes Sports Money. We have been monitoring a major sale in the works. The UFC has been sold for a reported $4 billion. And Michael, this is a story that you've been tracking.
Which was the largest purchase in sports history at that time. And here's the kicker. Endeavor didn't just buy a fight company, they bought a monopoly. They bought the rights to every fighter locked under contract, the broadcast deals, the sponsorships, the pay-per-views. They bought blood, and they knew how to sell it. By 2021, Endeavor took UFC public, valuation over $12 billion. Dana White's personal net worth, nearly $500 million. And the fighters, the ones who actually are the UFC, most of them are still walking home with $10,000, maybe $20,000 a fight. Less than a plumber, less than a teacher. Some fighters were selling t-shirts online just to afford rent. And others were crowdfunding for surgeries for the injuries they got inside the cage. The UFC wasn't broken, it was perfect. A perfect system designed to funnel billions upward, to executives, to investors, to Dana White. And the fighters, they weren't partners, they were the product.
We don't tell anybody what to say, what not to say, what to do. They all have their own personalities. Whoever you are, that's what I'm selling.
Most people assume that the fighters are underpaid because the sport is young or because there isn't enough money to go around. But that's not the truth. The UFC makes billions a year. The real reason fighters are broke is because of the contracts. When you sign with the UFC, you don't just agree to a fight. You agree to give up any leverage that you possibly ever had. You agree that you can't fight anywhere else. You can't even negotiate your own likeliness or your image because the UFC owns that for life.
What is the biggest issue from your standpoint? Is it simply money, or is it the other way, the way you're treated?
No, it's not simply money. I mean, obviously, money is a part of it, but it's also the term of the contract that I don't agree with it. You know, I don't feel like it's fair. I don't feel like I'm free. I'm free. Man, I don't feel like, I don't feel like I've been treated good, and it's unfortunate that I have to be in this position to be able to do that, to say that. But I think it's something that everybody should at least have a right claim for what's best for him, you know, because at the end of the day, we put a lot of work in this job, take a lot in our body to make it happen, so at least we can have a fair and square deal.
And if you think you can just sit out and wait for better terms, forget it. The UFC can extend your contract, freeze your career, or cut you completely. It's not a partnership, it's a prison sentence. Written in a legal language only a few can understand who already had money to begin with. In most major sports, the athletes take home over half of the revenue. The NFL, the NBA, even boxing, where the stars can command and ask for hundreds of millions of dollars because they have the power of renegotiating their contracts. But the UFC fighters, they only take home about 20%. And the UFC has all the leverage when it comes to renegotiating contracts. And the other 80%, it stays at the top with the executives, with Endeavor, with Dana White. And that's the power of a monopoly. Fighters don't have a union. They don't have collective bargaining. If you want to be recognized as the best in the world, there's only one case that matters, and Dana White knows it. And that's why he can laugh it off when fighters ask for more money or when critics criticize him. Because at the end of the day, the UFC doesn't need every fighter, but every fighter needs the UFC. Because look, every empire needs a face, right? In this case, the UFC has Dana White. He isn't just the president, he's the salesman, the frontman, the hype man who makes the circus feel like it's a sport.
Getting better here in this round, though.
Oh, man.
Until that.
Oh, he's done. He's done.
Oh! The count.
From the start, Dana knew the fighters weren't enough. People needed a villain. They needed a ringmaster, someone loud, brash, unfiltered. And Dana played that role perfectly. He swore at journalists, blasted fighters on social media, called critics idiots. Fans loved it or hated it, but either way, they couldn't look away. And that's the trick, because while Dana was out there making headlines, being the lightning rod, the system behind him kept on grinding. Fighters kept on signing their contracts, pay stayed low, the empire grew richer and richer by the day, and the spotlight stayed on Dana, and not on the machine and the mechanics that were running behind.
Las Vegas, Dana White, the king of Dublin, the notorious Conor McGregor.
Because look, Dana built his entire persona on one message. You don't like it? Don't fight here. And he means it because he knows that there's nowhere else to go. And that's what makes him dangerous. He's not just a promoter, he's a gatekeeper. He decides who fights, when they fight, how much they get paid, and whether their careers survive. To the fans, he's entertainment. But to the fighters, he's their boss. The only boss.
There aren't too many things you can talk shit about the UFC about. If you look at what we've done with the business in the last 22 years, it's incredible. Never been done, ever. The things that we've done in the fight business, you always have to have something to bitch about, I guess. And fighters always want to make more money. It's never going to happen while I'm here. Believe me, these guys get paid what they're supposed to get paid. They eat what they kill. They get a percentage of the pay-per-view buys. And the money is spread out amongst all the fighters. If you don't like it, there's a simple solution to this problem. Go start your own MMA organization. No barrier to entry. Knock yourself out. Pay them whatever you want to pay them. It's been done before. How's it worked out for other guys? Not well. Mind your business.
For all the showmanship, for all the glory, this is the reality for most of the UFC fighters. They fight 3 times a year. I mean, that's if they're lucky. They train full time, pay coaches, nutritionists, managers. They put their bodies on the line, and for what? $12,000 to show? $12,000 to win? When the lights go out, when the cameras stop rolling, many of them go back home broke. Some of them drive Ubers, some of them work in construction, some of them beg for sponsorships just to pay rent, and some of them turn to crowdfunding to cover hospital bills from injuries they sustained from inside the octagon. This is the cost of the system. The UFC doesn't pay for long-term health care. They don't even provide pensions. Once you're out and you're on your own. And it's not just about the money. The brain trauma is real. Concussion, CTE. Fighters who gave everything in the cage now live with slurred speech, memory loss, depression. They were warriors when the lights were on, and they were forgotten when they were gone.
Whenever this is all the way over, I actually just read through my wife's journal because I don't remember anything from May 28th to July 2. No recollection, zero idea, no idea what happened. It's been tough.
I mean, look, yeah, you have a few that make millions. You have Conor, Khabib, John Jones, and Aspinall. But they're the illusion. They're the handful of stars who distract us from the dozens of fighters on every undercard who will never see that type of money ever. The UFC doesn't need to make every fighter rich. They only need a few stars, just enough to keep the dream alive. The rest, they're replaceable and they're disposable. Some people ask, why don't the fighters just leave and go fight somewhere else, like Bellator, PFL, or One Championship? The answer, because those leagues are not the UFC. They don't have the reach, they don't have the money, they don't have the spotlight. For a fighter that's chasing legacy, chasing recognition, there's only one place that matters, one octagon, one brand, and Dana White owns it. And let's be real, it's not just about market power. The contracts are designed to trap fighters inside. There's something called a champion clause. If you win the UFC belt, your contract doesn't end when it's supposed to. The UFC can extend it indefinitely. In other words, the higher you climb, the more trapped you are. The fighters aren't free agents, they're assets. Assets locked under contracts, branded with the UFC logo, and sold to fans as gladiators chasing glory. Today, the UFC is untouchable. The empire Dana White and the Fertitas built for $2 million now sits on top of the sports world with a valuation north of tens of billions of dollars. It has TV deals, it has ESPN, international markets, and partnerships with Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and billion-dollar governments asking to host UFC fights in their country. The UFC is no longer just a fight promotion. It's a content factory. It's a global brand. It's a pipeline for new talent that they can exploit to make millions and billions of dollars. And here's the thing about factories. They don't care about workers. They care about the output. The UFC doesn't care if a fighter breaks. There will always be another hungry kid willing to sign a contract, another dreamer chasing a glory. I mean, look, for 2,000 years, people have paid to watch people fight. The Coliseum may have changed from stone to steel, from swords to gloves, but the system hasn't. People from 2,000 years ago fought for glory, but the glory was never theirs. It was for their empire, and it was for their kings. And in our time, 2,000 years later, the empire has a name. It's called the UFC. It sells the illusion of greatness, the belts, the lights, the walkouts that feel like rock concerts, but strip it all away, and what's left is a machine, a monopoly built on contracts and control, a system that was designed not to reward the fighters, but to exploit them. Dana White doesn't have to bleed. He doesn't even have to enter the cage, and neither do the investors. He built an empire where the house always wins, where the money always flows up, where the fighters remain disposable while the brand and Dana himself will outlive them all. This is why the UFC fighters are broke and Dana White isn't. So that being said, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and I will see you next time.